History Secrets.
There is a silent form of power that few people notice. It is not based on justice, nor on pure merit. It operates like an investment. And when you understand this, everything changes. Harvard, Yale, Princeton. These institutions don't operate only as universities. They function like venture capital funds. That may sound strange at first, but it makes sense when you observe their behavior. Imagine two possibilities. The first is safe, predictable, low risk, stable return. The second is uncertain, chaotic. It may fail completely, or explode into something massive. Which would you choose? That is exactly the logic that guides these universities. They are not interested only in good students. They are interested in bets, people who might fail, but who, if they succeed, change the world, and by doing so, elevate the name of the institution. It's not just about training professionals. It's about building symbols. Because in the end, no one remembers the hundreds of stable students. People remember the few who become extraordinary. That is the foundation of the game. And that's why the system seems so strange when seen from the outside. It does not seek balance. It seeks impact. To understand this more clearly, it is necessary to observe how these decisions are made, not only with numbers, but with a reading of potential. And potential in this context does not mean stability. It means intensity. Take a concrete example. A student with good grades, proper behavior, a clean trajectory. He is reliable, but he is not necessarily interesting. Now imagine someone different. Someone who does not have the best record, who did not come from the best schools, but who demonstrates something harder to measure. Urgency, internal pressure, a feeling that they must win at any cost. This type of profile draws attention, not because it is safe, but because it is unpredictable. And unpredictability in this system is synonymous with possibility. When an evaluator looks at an application, they are not just analyzing data. They are trying to answer a silent question. Can this person become someone impossible to ignore? And for that, there are signals. Not always obvious. Sometimes they come from life history. A student who grew up in difficult conditions, who had to constantly adapt, who faced rejection, who had to fight for every small step forward. This type of trajectory reveals something fundamental: resilience. But not only that, it also reveals an inner restlessness, an inability to accept imposed limits. And that, paradoxically, is value. Because people like this rarely settle for little fall. They don't just want stability. They want transformation. There is a psychological pattern behind this, a specific combination of factors: desperation, insecurity, and a certain moral flexibility. Desperation creates urgency, insecurity creates hunger, and moral flexibility removes barriers. This combination can be dangerous, but it can also be extremely powerful, because it creates individuals who do not stop, who are not satisfied, who keep moving forward, even when they have already achieved more than most. And this is exactly the type of person the system is looking for. Not because it is healthy, but because it produces results. This reveals something deeper. The system is not just selecting talent. It is selecting behavioral patterns. And these patterns are often linked to difficult experiences, competitive environments, family pressure, a constant feeling of inadequacy. All of this contributes to forming highly productive individuals, but also deeply restless ones. And here an important question arises. If this model works so well, why is it problematic? The answer begins to appear when we observe what happens next. After admission, after prestige, after the initial recognition, because getting into one of these institutions does not end the game. In fact, that's where it begins. Getting into one of these universities does not bring relief. It brings intensification. The illusion is simple. You believe that, once accepted, you will finally be able to rest. But what happens is the opposite. The environment turns into a field of continuous competition. And this time, you are no longer competing with ordinary students. You are surrounded by the most ambitious people in the world. People who, like you, were selected not for stability, but for intensity. Inside this environment, something quickly changes. The identity you built up to that point begins to dissolve. In your previous school, you were the best. You were recognized. Here, you are just another one. And not just anyone. One among many who are also considered exceptional. This creates a silent shock, because the value you assign to yourself is no longer enough. And at that moment, a new need emerges. To prove yourself again. And then, prove it again. And again. Without end. The structure of the environment reinforces this all the time. In the classroom, there is not only learning, there is performance, open discussions, direct questions, and everyone wants to stand out. It is not just about understanding the content. It is about impressing, showing mastery, showing presence, showing that you belong in that place. Outside the classroom, the logic continues. Exclusive clubs, restricted societies, highly selective programs. Each space is a new competition. Each opportunity, a new filter. And then, little by little, a perception begins to form. Nothing is neutral. Everything is being observed, evaluated, compared. You begin to feel that you are always being measured. By professors, by peers, by the entire system. And this generates constant pressure, an invisible surveillance that never disappears. This type of environment does not just select competitive people. It amplifies that trait. It turns ambition into necessity, and necessity into survival. Because within this logic, stopping means losing, and losing means disappearing. This creates a specific mindset. The world begins to be seen as a zero-sum game. If someone wins, someone loses. And in this game there is no room for neutrality. Either you move forward, or you fall behind. Over time, this leaves deep marks. Even outside the university, even years later, the feeling that you must constantly achieve does not disappear. It becomes part of your identity. You do not work just to live better. You work to feel sufficient. But that feeling is never complete. Because there is always someone ahead. There is always a next level. There is always something not yet achieved. This is the central paradox. The system produces extremely successful people, but at the same time, deeply dissatisfied ones. Because the criterion of value is never internal. It is always comparative, always external, always in motion. And this creates a cycle that never ends. Achieve, compare, feel insufficient, and start again. But this logic does not begin at the university. It begins much earlier, in high school, in the way performance is evaluated, in how success is defined, and, above all, in how children are prepared for this system. Because to survive in this environment, you need to have been shaped for it. Before the university, there is an invisible process, a type of preparation that does not appear in curricula, but that defines who is able to move forward. This process begins in formation, in how a person learns to see themselves in the world, and, above all, in how they learn to seek value. There are, essentially, two paths, two models of formation. The first is based on emotional stability. Parents say, "You are important regardless of what you do." There is constant support, security. The child grows up knowing they have value, even when they fail, even when they do not win. This type of formation creates balanced individuals, capable of living with satisfaction, but rarely obsessed. The second path is different, more subtle, and more common than it seems. Affection does not disappear completely, but it becomes conditional. It depends on performance, results, external recognition. The message is not said directly, but it is felt. You will be valued when you prove you deserve it, and that changes everything. In this environment, the child learns something specific. Value is not something you have. It is something you must earn, and more importantly, maintain. And this creates a particular type of motivation. A motivation that does not come from interest, nor from curiosity, but from necessity. The need to be accepted, to be recognized, not to be left behind. This type of formation may seem harsh, but it produces results. Some children do not just adapt, they thrive. They turn this pressure into drive. They turn insecurity into energy, and they begin to compete from an early age for grades, for positions, for approval. Over time, this pattern intensifies. High school stops being just a place of learning and becomes a selection system. Each test is a filter, each activity a differentiator, each decision a strategy, and the student learns to position themselves, to choose activities not for their meaning, but for their impact. This process shapes something deeper, the way a person interprets the world. They begin to see everything as a hierarchy. Everything is comparison. Everything is competition. And in this context, resting feels dangerous, because stopping may mean losing position, and losing position may mean losing value. So when this person arrives at university, they are already prepared, not to learn, but to compete. They understand the rules, even if they were never clearly explained. And, more importantly, they accept these rules as if they were natural. It is at this point that the system completes itself, because it no longer needs to impose pressure. The person begins to pressure themselves, constantly, internally, automatically, and this is extremely efficient, because it eliminates the need for external control. The individual becomes the system itself. But there is a cost that is not always visible at first. The feeling that value is never enough, that more is always needed, more recognition, more achievement, more validation, and this creates a void that is hard to fill. Then, an inevitable question arises. If this model generates success, why does it also generate suffering? And more than that, if it works so well for individuals, why can it be harmful to the world as a whole? The answer is not only in universities, but in the impact this kind of mindset creates in society. When this kind of mindset spreads, it does not remain limited to universities. It becomes culture, and gradually, it begins to shape the entire society. The principle seems simple. Reward the most capable. Value those who produce more. Select those who stand out. This is what we call meritocracy. In theory, it is fair. In practice, it is more complex. Because the system is not just rewarding competence, it is rewarding a specific type of personality. People who withstand constant pressure, who turn insecurity into fuel, who are not easily satisfied, and who are willing to keep moving forward, regardless of the cost. These people reach the top, take positions of influence, make decisions that affect millions, and carry with them the logic that shaped them, a logic based on continuous competition, scarcity, and constant comparison. At this point, something begins to happen. The world starts to be organized in the same way these people see it, as a game where the winner takes all, where stopping is losing, where slowing down is a sign of weakness. This affects companies, markets, institutions, and even human relationships. Everything becomes oriented toward performance, productivity, measurable results. And in this process, something essential begins to be lost. Value that cannot be measured. Genuine collaboration. Rest. Emotional stability. things that do not generate immediate recognition, but that sustain a healthy life. The problem is not only in competition, but in the absence of limits. When everything becomes competition, nothing is ever enough. There is always a next level. There is always someone ahead. There is always something not yet achieved. This creates a restless society, productive, but exhausted, capable of generating innovation at scale, but also incapable of stopping, of reflecting, of feeling satisfied. And here, a critical point emerges. The system does not just select people shaped by pressure. It begins to reproduce that pressure. At scale, parents begin to raise children within this logic. Schools reinforce this pattern. Companies demand this behavior. And so, the cycle perpetuates. What was once a selection mechanism becomes a model of life, a dominant way of existing. And in this model, human value is constantly conditioned by performance, by recognition, by position. This raises an inevitable reflection. If the system produces success, but at the same time produces anxiety, insecurity, and dissatisfaction, what is the true cost? And more importantly, is this cost being recognized? Or is it being ignored? Because the results seem too good to question? Perhaps the central point is not to reject the system, but to understand it, to see how it works, what kind of people it favors, and what kind of world it is building. Because in the end, the question is not only who wins, but what kind of life we are creating by trying to win. Throughout history, civilizations have risen, disappeared, and left clues scattered through time. Some of these clues have been discovered. Others are still waiting to be revealed. And in the next documentary, we will explore one of these mysteries. This is Historiae Secrets. Subscribe and continue exploring history with us. Because some secrets of history are still waiting to be revealed.